What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Jake from Citizen JV, and today we're going to be doing an extensive video on all three new Assassin's Creed games: Origins, Odyssey, and Valhalla. Now, anticipatedly, I was not really going to make this video at first because I was literally trying to do as much as I can to achieve, or how I wanted to achieve this video, and basically come to a conclusion at the very end of this video per se. So I'm going to do here my best of what I really am going to talk about when it comes to Origins, Odyssey, and Valhalla. First and foremost, Origins is by far my number one when it comes to the new Assassin's Creeds. Valhalla is going to be my second, and Odyssey is going to be my third. But however, we are actually going into order here from Origins, Odyssey, and to Valhalla. Now, what we're gonna do here is that I'm gonna talk about a lot of things here, and not just in terms of these games, but a lot of things in general when it comes to game mechanics, settings, and vice versa. So let's just hopefully we can make sense of everything. Now, what I love about Origins, I love Origins because in so many big ways, because it's ancient Egypt. I love the mystery of it. I love the world, and it really just ties into what this world actually was when it actually exists. Much like ancient Greece and Norse mythology also existed as well. But I think when it comes to ancient Egypt, not just in Origins, but as a whole, like I said, it's mysterious, it's absolutely fascinating, and I just love the way how this world actually works. It has to do with the world of itself. It has to do with why this game, I think, is the most important one, especially when it comes to comparing it to Odyssey and Valhalla. And the reason why I say this, that it's the important one, is because even though that Odyssey and Valhalla do somewhat help these new series as a whole to knowing what the Templar and Assassin conflict. But however, I think when it comes to Origins, though, I think it does it a little bit better in so many different aspects. And what I mean by this is that even though that things are different between the worlds of Origins and Odyssey and Valhalla, but they still have their own type of conflict between the Assassins versus the Templars. And that's what's the most unique way of with these newer Assassin's Creed games. But with Origins, it's one of those things to where it's like, I feel like that, I think it's, Origins is not just about its world, it's more on the lines of how it stands itself to the test of time. And I think when it comes to ancient Egypt versus ancient Greece and Norse mythology, is that it has to do with everything. It has to do with, like mummies, pyramids, how this whole entire world and structure of its own really holds together as its own stand of time. So that's what I'm trying to get to. And that's why I really prefer Origins over Odyssey. Now, what I want to do here is, I think when it comes to this new franchise, I really think that this game is, to me, felt like it was a more robustful way of getting through a specific type of area. And I love the side quests, I love its story, and I just love the character Bayek. I think Bayek was one of the most interesting and better portrayed and protagonist in an Assassin's Creed game. And I'm not basically condoning Cassandra or Alexios in Odyssey, or Eivor, or male Eivor or female Eivor, but I just feel like that when it comes to these new Assassin's Creed games, I think it really just boils down to that it's all a matter of preference. And that's where I'm feeling that, that's where this game, or these game series as a whole, or these new games as a whole, really just gives a sense of certainty up to where these games initially started from. And what we know from Origins is that it's a game to where it's not just of its world, it's not because of its character progression or what it pertains of being such an amazing game as it is, to me anyways, is because is what we know as the Assassin's Brotherhood. I think Origins, that's why I say that Origins is the epitome of this new series, because it really tells not just a very unique story differently from that of Odyssey or Valhalla, but that's where I feel like that where Origins really does a better job of maintaining a proper focus when it comes to the writing or when it comes to character progression, and where that writing and that character progression really is just not eliminates really it how it really boils down to closer to the end of this game. And what made Origins, to me, felt like so greatly appreciated by this game is the fact that not just because of what this game really does, of, portraying what the Assassin's Brotherhood was going to be like, but it was the fact of how it was formed in this game. And that's where I feel like that where Origins really just does something I wasn't really quite anticipating at first when I first played this game on my first initial playthrough. And that's where Origins really does a much better job with that. Now, I think when it comes to Odyssey, I think Odyssey did a lot of things that I really wasn't quite expecting when I first initially played it, because it was it's a big, huge open world. And, a lot of people really liked Odyssey to a better extent than from Origins, because Origins, laid a better foundation for Odyssey to be not just a bigger open world game as it is, but it has to do with that, Origins laid the foundation of its gameplay structure, its combat structure, and its open world structure, and that's where Odyssey was able to fulfill that whole entire concept of that into Odyssey and making it much better in fluidity of combat. And which is rightfully so that it is true. But however, I felt like when it came to Origins and Odyssey, it felt like that the combat in Origins, to me, it felt more natural or a little bit more organic than Odyssey. Now, while I would hardly agree that, some people will say, well, Odyssey's combat system is more fluid and it makes it more easier to maintain a proper balance of, with combat efficiency. And which is true, and like I said, I do agree with that. But what I'm saying is that I feel like that Origins does a little bit better, because I feel like your Origins has a better hitbox than Odyssey, because Odyssey has a bigger hitbox. And when it comes to the hitbox system, when it comes to Valhalla, Odyssey, and Origins, there's just something about that hitbox that the hitbox is not as huge or small. It's a little bit more open in Origins, but in Odyssey, I felt like that it was done. It was a little smaller in scope, but you were still able to get a certain amount of hitbox when it comes to being it bigger, smaller, or vice versa. And I'm hoping I understand where everybody's trying to go with this. So my apologies on that. Now, what I want to talk about here, though, too, I really think that Origins it's fascinating to me. And what I really want to talk about here, though, too, is that I want to talk about more on the lines of, its loot systems. I think the loot systems in Origins versus Odyssey versus Valhalla. And that's where I feel like that when it comes to the loot systems in these games, I think Origins and Valhalla are a little bit better than Odyssey's, because, like I said, I feel like that Odyssey's loot system was very, very sporadic. You were always constantly finding better pieces of gear than anything else because what you currently have equipped. And that's what I didn't like about Odyssey. Yes, they are the RPG mechanics of these three, but I think Odyssey just doesn't do it very well, in my personal opinion, because I just think that it's one of those things to where it's a very interesting way of how you want to be able to implement your own type of gameplay style. And Odyssey was able to do that. And you were able to somewhat do that in Valhalla, but Odyssey really took it to the next level of being able to do different types of abilities or, concepts of gameplay styles. And I think that's where Odyssey is more heavily focused on combat rather than stealth. Valhalla felt like that way though too, but it's the fact that I think that Odyssey is the pivotal game to a certain way to where it just doesn't always work, in my personal opinion. But I just think that when it comes to the loot systems in Odyssey, it's atrocious in my personal opinion because of what I just previously explained, and that's where I feel like that's where it kind of hurts a little bit, or hurts the Odyssey a little bit because of its loot system. Because like I said, you're always constantly finding something new, and it will eventually be better than your purple gear that you have currently equipped, or your legendary gear that you have equipped. And I didn't really like that because it's like I always like keeping the stuff that I already currently have on and just dismantle. So that's kind of a thing to where it's like I feel like that's where I felt it was not really necessary. But when you dismantle stuff, you are able to get certain types of materials, and being able to craft certain types of things like perk points or something like that to put on your gear, or perk abilities. And I did like that, however, but it was just the fact that it was easy enough to know that Odyssey it's still a great game. I still have a lot of fun with it. It's just that I have more fun with Origins because it's one of those things to where it's the setting that grabs me a little bit more. And I'm not saying that Ancient Greece grabs me, because it's inspiring, it's amazing looking, and I love its structures, I love its vistas, I love everything all about when it comes to Valhalla, Odyssey, and Origins. And that's fascinating, but I just felt like that when it came to Origins versus Odyssey, I just think that Origins does it better in that regard, in my personal opinion. Now, another thing I would really like to add here, though, too, is Valhalla is one of those games, comparing it to versus Odyssey and Origins, is that I felt like that Valhalla played a little bit more, it was more combat focused than anything else. Very much similar to that of Odyssey, because, even though the parkour systems still exist in Odyssey and Origins and Valhalla, but the stealth, not the stealth mechanics, but the parkour mechanics in these games, I felt like that when it came to parkour, Origins just did things a little bit better. It's funny that how I mentioned this, because I feel like that when it came to the parkour in Origins, it was more organic. It felt more real, and so, I mean, even though it doesn't play like what Unity does or what the original Assassin's Creed games do, but that's where I'm saying it's like I feel like that Odyssey and Valhalla, they're not more focused on the parkour systems. They are more focused on the combat. More combat and less parkour. Even though there is parkour systems in these games, but it's heavily dumbed down. And that's where I'm going. That's why I'm saying that I felt like that when it comes to comparing Odyssey, Valhalla, and Origins just does so many things better than from what Odyssey and Valhalla do. But that's, like I said, that's just my own personal opinion, of course. And I want to be able to understand that, this is just a video that I've been really trying to make for quite some time, and I've finally been able to find the time to do it. And so it's like I really have a hard time trying to understand or what I want to do when it comes to certain types of content, but I feel like that this is going to be pretty good regardless. And this is going to be, as I previously mentioned, this is going to be a video that's going to be a little bit longer than usual, but I might be able to cut things off just a little bit, just to understand that when it comes to Origins, Odyssey, and Valhalla and Odyssey are more, like I said, are more combat focused than anything else, and less parkour. Yes, you can do stealth in all three games, but I felt like that when it comes to the stealth in Odyssey and Valhalla, it's just not I felt like that it's good, but it's not as good as what we initially had back in the originals, if that makes sense. Because the originals had more of on the lines of social stealth and being able to break line of sight. I mean, you are able to break line of sight in Origins, Valhalla, and Odyssey, but it's just not, it just does not feel like that nostalgia factor from what the originals did, in my personal opinion. So it is what it is. But anyways, all I can say is this: is that, what I want to talk about more on the lines is the fact that when it comes to the stealth systems in these games, I think that Odyssey is pretty decent with stealth, and so is Valhalla, and so is Origins. But I think Origins just does something is what I wasn't initially trying to maintain a good focus on what I'm trying to say here. So Valhalla had a really good, unique stealth system, but they tried to do social stealth. And social stealth is one of the main focal points, or one of the main focus in the originals. And the originals does it so much better than from the newer ones, of course, do, because there is none. I do feel like that when it came to the social stealth in Valhalla, it was alright, but it just wasn't simply the best, obviously, because a lot of people were saying, well, it's still there, but it just doesn't work as well like what it initially did in the originals, and it makes sense. Oh man, let's see, what else do I want to talk about here? So another thing though too, what I've noticed in Odyssey, when it comes to the stuff in this game, it works and sometimes it doesn't always work. And I felt like that in Valhalla 2 and in Origins sometimes, because it's just something that to where I think when it comes to stealth mechanics in some games, it doesn't always be, or it's not always required. That's what I'm trying to get to. It's not always required to be in stealth when you're playing Valhalla or Odyssey. Because when it comes to Origins, I felt like when it came to Origins, it was one of those things to where I felt like that, like I said before, it felt a little bit more organic. Even though that there was no social stealth or any other stealth-focused pertainable in that game. But even so, it's like when you play Odyssey and Valhalla, the stealth was, like I said, it was okay. But I felt in a way that it was a little bit forced, and that's why I felt like that when it come to Odyssey and Valhalla, I felt like that. I'm like, okay, well, it's like, especially in Valhalla, it's just like, to me, it felt like I'm just like, no, I'm not gonna go in stealth. I'm just gonna freaking like go all of the Norseman barbarian, So that's what I felt like. And it felt like that in Odyssey though too, because Odyssey, you're playing as a demigod, for crying out loud. And you can leap from tall mounts of buildings and stuff and as such, and not have any drop damage. But you were able to have drop damage in Origins and Valhalla, and you weren't overpowered. And that's one thing I will say about Odyssey though too. I did not like being overpowered. It's one of those things to where it's like when you play a game like Odyssey, or comparing it to Origins and Valhalla, like I said, you're playing as a demigod. You're overpowered. You're an ancient Greece type of lord, of course, or a god, or whatever. And that's where I felt like that it was not completely, to me, it felt not completely necessary. And so it's like, I always said to myself, it's like, what the fuck am I doing here? It's like, I don't have to necessarily do stealth. I could just like go in and just like kill everybody. But even still, you can still get killed. But like I said, in Odyssey, though, you are able to be overpowered. And I don't like being overpowered in some games, because it kind of takes away that emergent gameplay in a certain way. It takes away the fun out of it. And I'm sure that, people will probably say, well, you're kind of wrong about that. It's like, well, but even so, it's just like, would you rather be overpowered than being less overpowered and being able to get hit and all that kind of stuff, and not being and dying and everything? So that's why I said, I felt like that when it comes to Origins, Odyssey, and Valhalla, I felt like that Origins and Valhalla are my favorite two of the new series. And like I said, I did like Odyssey to a certain degree. And I'm going to put this in here, though, too. It's like, I have played Odyssey on New Game Plus, and it's not as fun as I wanted it to be, because I was so used to, like, playing that game for a good solid month until I finally finished it. And that's where I felt like that Odyssey, to me, felt like it was a very bland experience, in my own personal opinion. The story was okay. One thing I will put in here, though, too, is that I will be talking about the DLCs in all 3 games, though, too. So that's why this video is going to be a little bit longer than usual. Okay, now let's talk about the DLCs. I love the DLCs in Origins. I love the Curse of the Pharaohs and the Hidden Ones in Origins. I think those DLCs were one of the most interesting DLCs I have ever played in a long time. Opposite of that of the older franchise with Ezio or as Altair. The first Assassin's Creed didn't have any DLC. But when it came to the Ezio trilogy, much like, Assassin's Creed 2, Brotherhood, and Revelations, they did have a certain... Well, actually, 2 only had DLC to it. No, that's wrong. Brotherhood had DLC as well. It was called the Copernicus theory or whatever it was. I don't know. I got that wrong, so my bad. But what I'm saying is that I felt like that when it came to Assassin's Creed 2 and Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, they had some really good story DLCs, and I love them when it comes to DLCs that tell a really cool, intricate story. And that's where I felt like that with Origins and Odyssey. They both, I think Origins had better DLC than Odyssey did, but however, here's one thing I will say. Odyssey to me felt like that it was not a very good. The DLCs were okay, but I felt in my personal opinion that it was going all over the place, and I didn't like it that very much. When a DLC and its story is going all over the place, you're just like constantly telling yourself, it's like, what the fuck? What's going on here? And that's where I felt like that the DLCs in Odyssey were kind of lacking to me, in my personal opinion. But of course, it's like, there's always going to be opinion or preference of what you're going to like or not to like. So let's go to Valhalla now. Valhalla had some actually really good DLC. I really liked the Siege of Paris, and I really did like Wrath of the Druids. They were very interesting, but what I loved about those DLCs in Valhalla is that they were quite extensively, not really overlooked, but they were extensively very well done. I really loved the fact that they had unique stories to it. They had some really unique side missions, and all those side missions, I'm trying to remember here, is that they were very well, intricately well designed and very well written. And that's where I say, Darby McDermott, or if I said that wrong, I'm sorry. He was a writer in the DLCs for Valhalla, if I stand correct, or the director. He actually ended up being the new director for Valhalla because Ashraf Ismail was the original director for Valhalla, and I don't think a lot of people know this. So listen to me dropping some knowledge on you. So that's where I felt like that when it comes to the DLCs and the story of the original main game of Valhalla, it was very cool. I really enjoyed it. But overall, I just think that, what I'm saying is that I am still comparing Origins versus Odyssey versus Valhalla, and like I said, I really think that the Siege of Paris was really cool. I thought that was very well done. I loved the concept of it. I actually did like the writing. I think the writing in that one was really, really good. And the Wrath of the Druids was actually really good though too, because it had some really intricate, well-designed fluidity of its, not just combat, but it was the writing overall. That's one thing I really want to talk about here, though, too, is that the writing in these new Assassin's Creed games they're really good. But, comparing the writing from Origins to Odyssey to Valhalla, I think Origins does... It's better than Odyssey's and Valhalla's, in my personal opinion, because, it's not just about the main story of Origins. It's the fact that I love the fact that Bayek was literally trying to understand what was going on. He wanted his revenge, but the revenge story on Origins was more. It wasn't not always about revenge though. It was more on the lines is that he finally figured out what was actually going on through the whole entire game of itself. You know, it had to do with how he was initially going to, you know, kill certain people off because of the fact that they were involved in his child's murder. You know, like the Order of the Ancients. And that's where I felt like when it came to Odyssey, I don't know what they were called in Odyssey, but no, it was Order of the Ancients. I take that back. And you know, like I said, you know, I really love the Templar conflict when it comes to Origins or Odyssey or Valhalla, because that's where I felt like that's where these games really set a proper balance of where these games take place way before the events of the original game of 2007. And that's captivating. And that's the reason why I love these games in general, is because I just think that these games are like the best I've ever seen, even though that sometimes these games are not always going to have the best story to them. But it's still a good, unique type of story. And that's where I think that when it comes to DLC, I think that when it comes to DLC to a certain type of game, much like Origins or much like Odyssey or much like Valhalla, they're not always going to be the best. But what I will say, like I said before, the DLC in Valhalla and Origins to me are better than Odyssey's. But I'm not saying that Odyssey's DLC wasn't good either. They were good. I finished them. It's just that there was just something about those DLCs that I just didn't really quite... It wasn't gripping enough. Even though I was understanding about what was going on and everything. But even still, it's just like, well, do I know what... It's like, do I really want to know what's going on? But at the same time, it's like, I need to know what's going on because the story is somehow implemented into the main story of the game itself. And that's where I felt like where the Templar assassin conflict comes in, and that's where I'm just like, I don't know. It felt so weird to me, but at the same time, it started finally making sense. Now, what I want to do here is that I'm actually going to be cutting this video shorter than I anticipated, because I feel like that this video is going to be way too long. So what I will do is, I think there is one thing I would really like to say about this new franchise of these new Assassin's Creeds. They are still worth playing in 2023. I really do highly recommend playing these games, even if you don't want to. You don't have to. You don't want to. It's kind of like, you know, I really can't say I don't know what I'm trying to say here, so my apologies. So I just think that when it comes to Origins, Odyssey, and Valhalla, I think Origins is a really good way of starting off and then play Odyssey and then play Valhalla, because, you know, what I will say is that I'm not going to try to do a spoiler here, but it is a little bit more of an Easter egg. I actually ended up playing Valhalla as of yesterday for a little while, and there's a mission called The Raven and the Cuckoo. And obviously seen in this video here. And so it was very interesting because, you know, I had been following it quite extensively on Assassin's Creed Mirage, obviously, because I'm very hyped up. I'm very excited for it. And I'm curious of what that game's going to do. But however, I'm kind of just veering just a little bit off topic. This mission is going to pertain to that of what Assassin's Creed Mirage is going to be, or what it will be when the game finally launches this year, October 12th of 2023. So what I will say is that I was heavily surprised by playing this mission, because I did not think that Valhalla was going to have like a Easter egg mission. But this mission is an Easter egg, because it really sets the bar, and it really sets the events in motion where Assassin's Creed Mirage will be taking place. For what I'm sure a lot of people don't know, but a lot of people do know as well, is that Assassin's Creed Mirage is going to be taking place in Baghdad. It's going to be in a different century. You play as Basim, obviously everybody knows, because everybody has played Valhalla. But I think when it comes to Mirage, I think it's going to be one of those games to where it's going to be fairly unique. And I am planning on making another video on Mirage because it's like I really want to.
We're gonna be rich as kings.
I don't know exactly what I'm trying to say here, but I really want to understand what Mirage is going to be doing, and from my understanding of where that game is going to go. And I find it fascinating that to where these games are heading in terms of, different types of settings, and, much like Mirage or much like what the original games did, they always have very unique settings. And I love the settings in these games. That's one thing I actually would like to discuss here, though, too. Looks like we might actually have to do this whole entire video after all. So the settings in these games are very, very, very cool. I love the settings in these games because they're, I remember playing the original Assassin's Creed back in the day. And so, from Assassin's Creed 2007 to what we have now until Mirage comes out. And what I loved about the first Assassin's Creed, it was, not only was it different, it was the fact that it was the setting. It was, you went to different types of settings, but it was in the Third Crusade. And I think the Third Crusade was heavily influenced. It was a very interesting era of its time, and I love that. It was Jerusalem, Acre, Damascus, and I forgot what another setting. There was another part of that setting in the Third Crusade. But however, I love that time. I think that time was absolutely amazing. It was, even though it was like a way of showing its graphic fidelity of the time when it initially came out. And to me, I thought it was fascinating. It was like one of the best I've seen in a game like that. Opposite of that, a Prince of Persia, of course. The Sands of Time trilogy. Now, I want to go to Assassin's Creed 2 now. Assassin's Creed 2 was, oh my god. I loved Assassin's Creed 2. I think it was definitely one of my favorite games of all time. Opposite of that of the first Assassin's Creed, even though we have had more following in the next years to come that we already have had. So that's where Assassin's Creed 2 comes in, and Assassin's Creed 2, it was absolutely amazing. I love Florence, Italy. I loved Renaissance Italy. I thought that was a fantastic setting for that game. It was really amazing. I loved it. I loved every single minute of it. And Ezio Auditore da Firenze, he was absolutely fucking amazing in 2 and in Brotherhood and Revelations, and all the more reason why I think Ezio is my all-time favorite assassin amongst others, but that's besides the point. So now I think we're going to go to Brotherhood. Brotherhood is a sequel to Assassin's Creed 2, like a lot of people know, and I actually ended up loving that game though too as well. But there is one slight thing I would really like to put in here as well, is that Assassin's Creed Brotherhood and Revelations, they had a 100% sync type of thing, to where you had to like do certain types of constraints in order to achieve 100% synchronization. And I believe I talked about that a little bit extensively in my Assassin's Creed Brotherhood and Revelations video. And those time constraints were really hard to do, especially, when it comes to trying to do that 100% synchronization. And I just didn't like that. I despised it, basically, because it's like, it felt to me, even though that they weren't Assassin's Creed games, but it was the fact that it's like, I have no time to try to get 100% synchronization, because all I want to do is have fun. That's basically what I said, though, too, if I remember correctly. So that's one of the things that I did not like. That is the only thing I did not like about Assassin's Creed Brotherhood and Revelations, because of that specific reason. Now we are going to go to Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. Pirates of the Caribbean, anyone? So, Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag was fucking amazing. I loved it. And, playing as Edward Kenway as a pirate, and initially becoming an assassin, and ended up having a family, and his son ended up being Haytham Kenway, which we all known to be in Assassin's Creed 3. And, actually, I take that back. Assassin's Creed 3. I really don't know what I want to discuss about Assassin's Creed 3. I liked it, but the only thing I did not like about it is that they had to kill off Desmond. I'm sure that a lot of people know that, you know, they killed him off because it was the end of his story. I'm sure. But even still, it pissed off a lot of people. But it is what it is, like I said before, so we're not going to worry about that. Now we're going to go back to Assassin's Creed 4. You know, and, you know, like I said before, you know, Edward Kenway, he was an ultimate badass pirate. Loved the way how he played. And, you know, you're able to play with, you know, dual swords and all that kind of stuff, and or being able to assassinate people with dual swords rather than using the hidden blades. That was really cool. And one thing I will say about Black Flag, though, too, is that initially Assassin's Creed 3 brought the parkour systems back to a certain degree to where it played like the originals, obviously. And so that's where the parkour systems ended up not going away, but ended up gaining way towards Black Flag, and that's where Black Flag was initially... That's where Black Flag ended up being more fluid in combat and more fluid in the more fluidity of its parkour systems, and that's where I felt like that when it came to Black Flag, it was much better in my personal opinion. But either or. Now let's see what another Assassin's Creed game. I believe it was Syndicate. Syndicate was definitely one of my favorite Assassin's Creed games amongst others, like Black Flag or 2 or the first one. I actually did enjoy the first one quite a bit. But however, Syndicate was actually rather unique to me because I felt like that game was initially... Oh man, I don't know. But, you know, initially that game was it was underwhelming to a lot of people, especially when it came to Assassin's Creed fans, because, you know, a lot of fans were very distraught. We were all frustrated why these games were getting always annual releases, because Assassin's Creed Brotherhood and Revelations actually ended up being an annual release. I don't know, a lot of people knew this, but I'm just putting some knowledge out there as well. And that's where I felt like that when it came to the annual releases, those games were still good in its own unique way, and I still loved them, even though of the time constraints. So, going back to Syndicate, I think Syndicate was definitely one of my favorite ones, especially, I mean, it did bring back some of its original concepts from the originals, you know, like, much like Assassin's Creed 2, much like Revelations and Brotherhood and the first Assassin's Creed, because, you know, the social stealth. And so that's what I loved about those original franchises as a whole. And so what I will say here, Syndicate, like I said, Syndicate was just... I thought Syndicate was absolutely amazing. Absolutely loved it. They had so many different things that you can do. It did have some role-playing aspects to it as well. You were able to level up. But, you know, it had to do with each type of region of industrial London. That's where it took place, and I thought that setting was absolutely fascinating. I loved it. I loved every single minute of it. But anyways, that's all I gotta say about that. So what I will say here in leaving this video, please feel free to play Valhalla: Dawn of Ragnarok as well. I'll probably end up making a video on that one as well. I don't know when, but I will find the time. But anyways, this is Jake from Citizen JV. Thank you for tuning in. Greatly appreciate it. Any comments or questions, please feel free to put them in the comment section below, and I'll be more than happy to reply back if and whenever possible. And you guys have a good rest of your weekend. Peace.